Hello, class. My name is Alyssa.
Hi, my name is Zakia.
And I'm Gabby.
And I'm Elizabeth.
And today we're going to talk about the development and prevention of cardiovascular diseases. Next. So before we begin, we're going to talk about how the heart works. It's divided into the left and the right side. The division of the heart prevents oxygen-rich blood from mixing with oxygen-poor blood. The right side of the heart which is comprised of the right atrium and the right ventricle. It collects and pumps blood to the lungs through the pulmonary arteries. Then the lungs refresh the blood with a new supply of oxygen. The lungs also breathe out carbon dioxide, which is a waste product. And then after that, oxygen-rich blood enters the left side of the heart, which comprises the left atrium and the left ventricle. And then the left side of the heart pumps blood through the aorta to supply tissues throughout the body with oxygen and nutrients. The cardiovascular system is comprised of three elements: the heart, arteries, and veins, which the heart is the main, it's the pump that provides the force which propels blood throughout the body. The arteries carry fully oxygenated blood away from the heart when it contracts, and then the veins return the blood back to the heart after oxygen has been extracted. So how does this work? Basically, all three elements just work together to move and transport blood. Any problem with these three elements can lead to cardiovascular diseases, which is also known as CVD. So what happens when the heart isn't working properly? You'll experience specific symptoms that can lead to cardiovascular diseases, which we'll discuss throughout this presentation. Some cardiovascular diseases that we're going to talk about today are coronary artery disease, abnormal heart rhythms, heart attacks, heart failure, strokes, heart valve disease, and heart muscle disease, which is also known as cardiomyopathy. Some general risk factors for developing CVD are age, gender, family history, smoking, poor diet, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol levels. So when it comes to aging, plaque builds up inside the walls of your arteries and over time hardens and narrows your arteries, which limits the flow of oxygen-rich blood to your organs and other parts of your body. Oxygen and blood nutrients are supplied to the heart muscle through coronary arteries, and heart disease develops when plaque builds up in those coronary arteries, reducing the blood flow to the heart muscle. Next slide. Gender also plays a role. It's very different for men and women. For men, men are generally at higher risk for CVD. Their heart is bigger, and when they're stressed, their arteries of the heart constrict, which raises blood pressure, which gives them a bigger chance of a heart attack. For women, their heart is smaller and the walls are thinner. When they're stressed, their pulse rate rises and the heart pumps more blood. However, for women, their risk for CVD increases after menopause because of a decline in the natural hormone estrogen, which estrogen is believed to help keep blood vessels flexible. But with that, the blood vessels are relaxed and they expand to accommodate with the blood flow. Family history is also an important factor. To find out if you're at risk, you can look at two things. Which family member was diagnosed with the heart disease and their age when diagnosed. So for example, if your brother or father were diagnosed before the age of 55, then you're at a greater risk for heart disease. If it's a mother or a sister before the age of 65, then you're also at higher risk. Genes also play a role. They affect how the body works, and they can pass on high risk conditions like high blood pressure and high cholesterol levels. There are ways to prevent this, which will be discussed towards the end of the presentation. Another risk factor is smoking. Smoking includes nicotine, which is dangerous and highly addictive. It can cause increases in blood pressure, heart rate, and narrowing of the arteries. It contributes to the hardening of the artery walls that can help lead to a heart attack. Nicotine also constricts blood vessels, where carbon monoxide can damage the blood vessel's inner lining, which makes them more susceptible to atherosclerosis. With that said, heart attacks are more common in smokers than in non-smokers, so either quit smoking or don't start to smoke.
So next we have our diet. So what we eat and what we drink affects how our body reacts, or it can have a negative effect on our body. So if we're not eating, or if we are eating saturated fats, trans fat, and cholesterol, or eating a lot of foods that have a lot of cholesterol, it can lead to a heart disease, which was also mentioned that it can lead to arteriosclerosis. It was also linked that saturated fats tend to increase our LDL levels, which is bad cholesterol, which we'll be talking about in a few slides. But we can monitor our food consumption. Our next is blood pressure. So blood pressure can cause a coronary artery. It can clog those, which just means that the blood that is flowing through those arteries are less. So it narrows that passage for the blood to flow. Also, I did some research on the CDC website. It showed that because of high blood pressure and the stuff that we eat and consume, that it can lead to 75% of strokes. That would also be talking about later on, and also coronary heart disease, which is happens when we have high blood pressure, which would be 47%. Also, with our blood pressure being high, the arteries can harden and create a very plaque within the arteries that can also cause blood clots. When the arteries do become accumulated with the plaque or blood clots, the blood flow does not go smoothly to the heart, and then also it could stop the oxygen and nutrients that our body needs. So our next topic that we'll be talking about is cholesterol. So first, what we need to do is to define cholesterol. So cholesterol is the form of fat produced by the body, and it is also consumed in food that our body uses to construct healthy cell walls, aid food digestion, and assist in the vitamins and hormones that we need, that our body needs. Also, cholesterol comes from two sources. So our liver produces the cholesterol that we need that is good, and also we get it from what we eat and which we drink and what we consume. So with that being said, we do have two molecules. We have one being the high dense lipoprotein, and then we have the bad one, which is the low density lipoprotein, which is considered bad. But we'll discuss, I believe we're discussing the bad one first. So the bad one, which is the LDL, low density lipoprotein, it's a bad molecule because it initiates a process that is called arteriosclerosis, the buildup of plaque what's inside the arteries, the artery wall. That happens because the lining of the walls of our arteries can cause a minor damage, creating small, almost kind of like small holes or small divots in that lining, in which that the small LDL molecules can penetrate in the artery wall. So our immune system reacts to that, seeing that the LDL is a foreign invader. So that means that it's not, the LDL molecule is not supposed to be inside of artery. So once the immune system chemically changes that LDL molecule into a foaming cell, which shields around the LDL molecule. This creates a glue-like substance that builds on that artery wall, which stops the LDL from moving. So that's how we get that a clogged artery or a plaque buildup on our or inside of our artery. Also, too, that process of the LDL getting plaqued up, causing the inside of the arteries to fill up with plaque and causing the inner lining wall of the artery to bulge out into an open space where the blood flows. So right on that picture, you can show what a normal artery looks like on the left-hand side. And then also on the right side, it shows the plaque that is building up. And also you can see that the blood flow is not as consistent as you can see on the left. And also this process of the LDL getting built up on the arteries and it blocking blood flow can also lead to coronary artery disease, which we'll be talking about in a few slides. We have also the good levels of our cholesterol, which is what our liver provides, which is the high density lipoprotein, the HDL. This takes away cholesterol from the cell sites. So when we have a lot of HDL in our bloodstream, it can increase our body's capacity to absorb excess cholesterol, even the LDL. So it is very vital to have those molecules in our system. Also, too, we are able, the HDL molecules are less quickly to build up plaque in our arteries, and they protect against heart disease. And then we're going to talk about some of the specific developments of the HVD. So one of them is a common disease is the coronary artery disease, which was earlier talked about how the LDL can lead to the coronary artery disease. So the CAD results in a low blood flow of the heart, which is what the LDL molecule does. So how that happens is the bulging plaque can also burst. So as within our artery, that buildup of that plaque can burst, and that results in a large blood clot that prevents all blood flow. So if the heart doesn't get enough blood, it won't have enough oxygen, and we won't be able to have a functioning body, and pretty soon the cells will start to die as well. Some of the symptoms of the coronary artery disease is chest pain and discomfort. And two, individuals who do have this disease, it's not something that they're able to spot right on. Some of the research from the CDC said that most people often have a heart attack, so something very significant in their life for them to realize that they have this certain disease. Some of the symptoms of that heart attack would be chest pain or discomfort, a weakness, lightheadedness, or feeling nauseous, or even cold sweat, pain and discomfort in the arms and shoulders, and shortness of breath. So over time, this disease, the coronary artery disease, does weaken our heart muscles, and it can lead to a lot of heart failure, and it can even lead to a lot of or more serious conditions than the heart. But there is certain ways in which we can prevent and treat the coronary disease. Even though an individual may have it, there are still ways to slow down the process and to help build back those arteries.
Okay, so now we're talking about the development of abnormal heart rhythms, which is actually called arrhythmia. This basically happens when the electrical impulses that control your heartbeat aren't working properly. So they could be sending a signal to have the heartbeat too quickly or too slow, or maybe irregular. So it could be a little bit of both. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, but a racing heartbeat is called tachycardia, which is greater than 100 beats a minute. And then a slow heartbeat is called bradycardia, which is 60 beats a minute. Some symptoms of this could be fluttering in the chest, pain and discomfort, shortness of breath. You could also have like anxiety from it, and almost like a weight on your chest, along with fatigue, lightheadedness, and sweating and fainting. So continuing on, some causes of it, a lot of people are born with it and they actually don't realize it until they get older. It could also be caused from coronary artery disease, along with like high blood pressure, diabetes, and smoking. Also excessive consumption of alcohol and caffeine, because caffeine is an accelerant, so it accelerates the heart rate. So drinking too much of it could actually cause you to have an abnormal heart rhythm. In normal healthy people though, a lot of people don't have arrhythmias. They're not too common to develop unless like an outside force acts on it. So like electrical shock, illegal drugs, stuff like that. So now, what is a normal heartbeat? So the heart is made up of 4 chambers. There's 2 upper and 2 lower. The 2 upper chambers are called the atria, and the 2 lower are called the ventricles. The heart has a rhythmed natural pacemaker to control the heartbeat, and this is actually called the sinus node. So this is located in the right atrium, which we'll show you a picture of it on the next slide. But this helps the heart produce its electrical impulses. So basically, the sinus node will send the impulses, and the atria muscles will then contract due to those impulses. And then this causes them to pump the blood into the ventricles. And then the impulse also will enter the AV node and allow the ventricles to have time to fill. They'll receive the signal that, hey, we're going to be pumping blood to the body. And they do just that, and they start pumping to the body. And then it's also important to note that a normal resting heart rate is 60 to 100 beats per minute. So on this slide is just kind of a demonstration of like what I just talked about. So on the left side of the screen, we have the sinus node. It goes into the right atrium, so that would be the signal being sent. It's those arrows. Also goes into the left atrium as well. And then it will go to the AV node, which will allow the left and right ventricles to know that it's time to fill with blood. They will then receive the signal and then start to pump blood to the rest of the body. So tachycardia in the atria. So tachycardia, again, is when your heart rate is greater than 100 beats per minute. There are many different types of tachycardia, but the 2 most common are atrial fibrillation and atrial fluttering. Atrial fibrillation is basically when the heart rate is just super chaotic. So there's no actual rhythm to it. It's very uncoordinated. It's weak almost, and it can actually cause a stroke. Most of this time, like when people get it, it's usually due to like some type of trauma. So usually like the heart can kind of correct itself on rhythm and it might cure on its own, but if not, it could possibly lead to stroke. So anyone that might be experiencing that would then have to go and see a doctor about it. Atrial flutter, it's very similar to atrial fibrillation. So it's still a very rapid heart rate, but this time it actually has a rhythm to it. And this also could lead to stroke if untreated. Continuing on with tachycardia in the atria. So there's also a supraventricular tachycardia, which is actually a lot of different arrhythmias that are in the ventricles. These are usually just palpitations that begin very rapidly and end suddenly. So you might not feel them at all, and then they just come on all of a sudden. So it's not very constant. It can either happen in the atria itself or in the AV node. And there's also the Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome. So this is also a type of supraventricular tachycardia. Basically, this is when you have an extra electrical pathway in your heart, and it's between your ventricles and your atria. This only happens if people are born with it. Like, you're not just going to develop an extra pathway one day. But basically, it's present at birth, and you might not even know that you have it until you're entering early or late adulthood. Usually it's way later in life that you'll figure it out, but you'll kind of have like a fluttering or a pain sensation in your chest, like a weight on your chest almost. And basically what the heart does is the heartbeat will actually skip the AV node. So before it was supposed to enter the AV node in order to get to the ventricles, but now it will skip it entirely altogether and just go straight from the atria to the ventricles. So basically this leads to just short circuiting of the heart, and it could lead to like super rapid heartbeat just out of nowhere. So now we're going to talk about tachycardia in the ventricles. So there's ventricular tachycardia. This is also very like abnormal electrical signals in the ventricles. Basically, due to this, there's just not enough time for the ventricles to fill. So because the heartbeat is being so rapid in the ventricles, where the ventricles pump the blood, fill to pump the blood to the body, because they're getting signals so quickly, they barely get to fill and then pump small amounts to the body. So it's not too serious unless you've already had like a weak or damaged heart from a previous heart disease or maybe a trauma. But ventricular fibrillation is a little bit more serious. So basically the rhythm of your heart is just all over the place. So it's super rapid, super chaotic. It's not consistent at all. So there's no rhythm to it whatsoever. And this will happen if you were in like a serious trauma, or maybe you had a very serious disease. So it can't actually last too long, because the longer it goes, it'll actually kill you. It's very fatal. So basically this is also the same thing, that the heart rate just all over the place in the ventricles, that we're not getting enough blood whatsoever to the body. And due to this, we're not getting the nutrients and oxygen that we need. So the body will soon to shut down and you could die. There's also the Lawn-QT syndrome. This is also when the heartbeat is just very chaotic and can cause sudden death. A lot of people don't know that they have this either, but it can come on due to medications, illegal drug use, genetic mutations, stuff like that. And then we have bradycardia. So this is when your heart rate's pretty slow. It's at usually like 60 beats per minute. And it's not always a bad thing. Like a lot of people do have a lower resting heart rate because they are athletic. But two very common types of bradycardia are sick sinus syndrome and conduction block. So sick sinus syndrome is basically when the sinus node isn't able to send signals correctly to the heart on when to beat, when to pump. So basically, we have a fluctuating heart rate that could be super quick 1 second or normal and then can slow down. This usually happens in older adults, usually due to their heart either becoming weak from a previous heart disease, or which actually will cause the scarring to block the signal, or they could have some type of like blockage, like plaque or something that could be blocking the signal itself. We also have the conduction block as well. So this is basically where there's an actual block in the AV node, and so the upper and lower levels of the heart can actually be blocked off entirely. And this can lead to very slow or skipped beats just because the signal cannot go through completely. So it's kind of like if you're trying to like shine a flashlight at something, like you're not going to see it on the other end. So like if you shine a flashlight like through a paper, you can usually see it on the other side. But if you shine it through like a rock, like you're not going to see it. So that's kind of what it is. It's like it's an actual block between the upper and lower halves of the heart. And then we have premature heartbeats. So this is when your heart feels like it's skipping a beat, but it's actually adding an extra beat. Again, you could have like a fluttering sensation or almost like a pain in your chest. And sometimes it could just happen occasionally. It might not actually be there long term. It just could come on due to like stress or like extra exercise, or maybe you took like some stimulants that cause a premature heartbeat. But sometimes, like especially if you're getting them more frequently, you would still want it to get it checked out, because if it's not checked and taken care of, it can actually cause a long-term arrhythmia problem. It can also lead to a weak heart just due to the fact that your heart's doing that extra beat, but there's nothing correctly producing like blood wise. So the heart would be overworking, and then it could lead to a weak heart eventually when you get older. So the development of heart attacks. So heart attacks are a blood clot that blocks the blood flow to the heart. This can be fat or cholesterol, which creates a plaque in the arteries, and specifically the coronary arteries. The plaque can actually rupture and form a blood clot, which the blood clot will interrupt the blood flow to the heart and can actually cause damage to the heart muscle over time. Some symptoms of this are pressure or pain in the chest, nausea, heartburn, abdominal pain, and fatigue. Next slide. So some causes of why it happens is that like the coronary artery will become blocked, which can create plaques, like I said, can rupture and actually cause cholesterol to be in the bloodstream. Blood clots that can just form on their own and block nutrients and oxygen to the heart, so that could cause the heart attack as well. You could also have a coronary artery completely shut down, and this could be due to like tobacco or drugs. Heart failure. So the development of heart failure. So it is actually the most common heart disease. It's where basically the heart just can't pump enough blood to meet the body's needs. This is usually caused by some conditions that damaged or weaken the heart. So if you had like a previous heart condition, but it's not always the case. Sometimes it can kind of just happen on its own. It could also happen from the heart becoming stiff. So basically what that means is like the ventricles become so stiff that they cannot accurately fill with blood. And so they do not fill enough between the beats. So basically they just, since they're so stiff, they can't fill properly, and then they can't pump properly. So that's how the body is lacking in blood. The ventricles can also stretch too. So that way is another way that the body won't get enough blood. It's just because they become so weak. You could also have it from heart defects, cardiovascular disease, valvular heart disease, and heart infections. Some symptoms are short of breath, tiredness, swollen ankles, loss of appetite, coughing, dizziness, abdominal bloating, and sleep disturbances. Also, just to note, heart failure can involve left side or right side, or it can be both. Usually though, when you have heart failure, it usually happens on the left side of the heart, just because that is the main pumping chamber. And then development of strokes. So there's two types. There's ischemic and hemorrhagic. So ischemic is when there is a blockage in the artery that supplies blood to the brain. Basically, this blockage will reduce blood flow and oxygen, and it can lead to damage or death of the brain cells. Especially like if someone has a stroke, let's say they live at home alone and they're an older adult, they have a stroke. And if they are unattended for such a period of time, like let's say no one finds them for a few hours, the longer that they are laying there without someone providing oxygen for them, or them to be intubated, then they will actually lose a lot of functions. So like they can lose the ability to walk, ability to eat, they can lose a lot of memory as well. So they can wake up and be in different time settings, which is crazy. But yeah, just a fun fact on that. And there's also hemorrhagic. This is when weak blood vessels burst and it causes bleeding into the brain. And a person that would have this would experience basically a sudden onset headache or like a head pain. And then development of heart valve disease. So the heart has 4 valves. There's the aortic, the mitral, the pulmonary, and the tricuspid. Basically, the valves have to make sure that they open and close properly to move blood throughout the heart. But valves can become damaged over time due to narrowing, which is called stenosis, leaking, or improper closing. This is usually due to sometimes old age. It could just be due to heart diseases that actually play onto heart valve disease. And next slide. So yeah, like the causes of it, you can actually be born with an issue with your valves. So there are people that actually do get replacements for it. You could have rheumatic fever, which is actually a very intense fever that specifically targets the heart. You could have an infection to the heart. You could have connective tissue disorders. And some symptoms of it include fatigue, shortness of breath, irregular heartbeat, swollen feet, chest pain, and fainting.
So the development of heart muscle disease, it's also called cardiomyopathy, which is the thickening or enlarging of a heart muscle. There's 3 different kinds. There's dilated, hypertrophic, and restrictive. Symptoms include breathless during exertion and rest, swelling of legs, fatigue, irregular heartbeats, and dizziness. Next slide. For dilated cardiomyopathy, it's the most common type, and it can be caused by a reduced blood flow to the heart, and it can also be inherited. So like shown in the picture on the side, it shows that the ventricle is enlarged with a weak heart muscle on the side of it. Next slide. For hypertrophic, it's when the heart muscle becomes thick, like shown in the picture. And it's usually inherited, and it can also develop from high blood pressure and aging. And lastly, for restrictive, it's the least common, and the heart muscle becomes rigid and less elastic. It's caused by diseases like connective tissue disorders and buildup of abnormal proteins. If you see in the picture, compared to a normal heart, a restrictive would have like stiffness at the walls of the ventricles. Next slide.
Okay, so now we'll be talking about mortality rates and how it's related to cardiovascular diseases and coronary artery diseases. So mortality of CVD, it's the leading cause of death in the US. It is more dangerous to adults over 65, and actually about 655,000 Americans die from heart disease each year, which is about 1 in every 4 deaths. It's the second leading cause of death for those between 25 to 64 years of age. And in the next slide, I'll show a comparison of the different age groups. Another fact is that one person dies every 36 seconds from a cardiovascular disease. And because of this, it actually cost the US about $219 billion from 2014 to 2015, which I thought was a very interesting fact. And this could be because of healthcare services and medicines and just the treatment that it involves. So about 18.2 million adults aged 20 and older actually have a coronary artery disease. And in the US, someone has a heart attack every 40 seconds, and about 1 in 5 of those are silent. So some people don't even know, or they're not aware of it, but the damage is already done. So it's already too late, as you can say. So this picture is found in our text, and it breaks down the number of deaths by 4 different age ranges and how heart disease is different by each group. So as you can see in the top right diagram, the percentage of deaths of heart diseases for ages 25 to 44 is 12%. And the diagram below that is for 65 and older. The percentage of death by heart disease is 27%. So there's a big jump between the 2 age groups. If you go through each one, you see more of how much each age group it jumps to, all the way from 1 year old. And you can see that as you get older, how important it is to keep in mind how important it is to exercise and be aware of improving your health to live a longer and healthier life. So it can also vary by ethnicity, sex, and race. For women from the Pacific Islands and Asian American, American Indian, Alaska Native, and Hispanic women, heart disease is the second leading death next to cancer. And so this chart also is from the CDC, and it's based off the year 2015, and it kind of breaks down by ethnic group and men and women. And what I thought was very surprising was that the highest percentage for both men and women was for whites, non-Hispanic. So how to prevent some of these diseases? One would be a healthy diet. It can be really hard to change eating habits, and now with COVID and staying at home a lot, if you are staying at home, I know some people have like essential jobs and stuff, so they have to be out, but if you are staying at home, it can be easy to have your eating habits start to go negatively. So these are some tips recommended specifically from the Mayo Clinic about trying to have a healthy diet, and how to, if you are not having a healthy diet currently, how to help you kind of steer into that direction by not completely cutting everything you love out right away. So first is going to be portion size. How much you eat is just as important as what you eat. So overloading your plate, taking seconds, and eating until you feel stuffed can lead to eating more calories than you should. Or even going to a restaurant, because sometimes, and I feel like most of the time, the portions served are more than anyone needs. So a good tip as well is to try using a smaller plate or bowl when serving yourself a plate. Then you can also try larger portions of low-calorie, nutrient-rich foods such as fruits and vegetables, and do smaller portions of high-calorie, high-sodium foods and refined, processed, or fast foods. It kind of just helps you like train your brain a little bit of how much to eat. And then second is eating more veggies and fruits to your plate. These are good sources of vitamins and minerals, and are also low in calories and rich in dietary fiber. Like other plants or plant-based foods, they contain substances that may help prevent cardiovascular diseases, and they can help you cut back on higher calorie foods such as meat, cheese, and snack foods. They also recommend that fruits and vegetables to limit would be like coconut and vegetables with creamy sauces, canned fruit packed with like heavy syrup in it and like preservatives, and frozen fruit with sugar added to it, because there's a lot of fruit that already have a lot of sugar in it naturally. So ones to pick instead would be either fresh, of course, or frozen vegetables and fruit, low sodium canned vegetables, and if you do like certain canned fruits, and canned fruit packages with juice or water is best. Third would be adding whole grains to your diet. Whole grains are good sources of fiber and other nutrients that play a role in regulating blood pressure and heart health. And you can increase the amount of whole grains in a heart healthy diet by making just some simple substitutions for refined grain products. You can also be like adventurous and try like a new whole grain, like whole grain farro, quinoa, or barley. And some grain products that are recommended to be avoided and limited would be white refined flour, white bread, muffins, frozen waffles, cornbread, egg noodles, buttered popcorn, and high-fat snack crackers. And what's recommended is whole wheat flour, whole grain bread, preferably 100% whole wheat bread, or whole grain bread. High fiber cereal with at least 5 grams or more of fiber in a serving. brown rice, barley, whole grain pasta, and oatmeal. So to continue, step 4 is to limit unhealthy fats in your diet. So limiting how much saturated and trans fat you eat is an important step. As we were discussing earlier, how important saturated and trans fat can be when you have a lot of it. So it's important to help reduce your blood cholesterol and lower your risk of coronary artery disease. So a high blood cholesterol level can lead to buildup of plaques and arteries and atherosclerosis, as we've been mentioning, which can increase your risk of heart attack and stroke. So according to the American Heart Association, they actually offer 2 guidelines for how much fat to include in a healthy diet, which is to, 1, not include more than 5 to 6% of your total daily calories of saturated fat, and to completely avoid trans fat. One way you can help trim fat off of your diet is cutting the extra fat that's on like meats, choosing lean meats that have less than 10% fat, and avoid using butter when you're cooking. It's recommended to use olive oil or canola oil. And then step 5 would be to choose low-fat protein sources like lean meat, poultry, and fish. Low-fat dairy products and eggs are good sources of protein. Fish with plenty of omega-3 fatty acids like salmon and mackerel, those are really good alternatives as well. And the proteins that they recommended were low-fat dairy products, so like 1% milk or skim, fish, skinless poultry, legumes, soybeans and soy products, and lean ground meats. And then step 6, I know I keep saying like steps because they have them listed as steps, but these could be taken in any order. It's just recommended to follow these like guidelines. So number 6 is reducing sodium intake. Reducing your sodium is very important for having a heart healthy diet. Eating a lot of sodium can contribute to blood pressure, high blood pressure, and risk for cardiovascular diseases. And it's recommended to not have more than 1,500 milligrams of sodium for most adults. And for more healthier adults, it's recommended to not have more than 2,300 milligrams of sodium a day, which is about a teaspoon of salt. So some low salt items that are recommended to substitute for table salt and other things like tomato juice, condiments like ketchup, mayonnaise, and soy sauce, what you probably see at like restaurants as well, would be salt-free seasoning blends, herbs and spices, reduced salt cans and soups, which is good because I know now when you go grocery shopping, there's a lot of cans that have the reduced sodium option. So those ones are better to choose. And then the last 2 are pretty straightforward. Number 7 is planning your meals. So like meal prepping. This can also mean just having foods ready to go to make or prepping snacks, so when you're hungry you don't have to think about what to have. You can just quickly grab like your bowl of fruit that you already have picked and eat that, and then that helps avoid you going straight to whatever is in your pantry like cookies. And then number 8 would be to make sure you do have time to treat yourself and have like an indulgence every now and then. But don't let it be like an excuse to always have an unhealthy snack, because then that's just gonna not help you progress. So for instance, like if you have been sticking to your healthy improvements for a few days, then something small like a small handful of chips won't completely make you go back to square one, but the point is to not overeat those indulgences. So caffeine is a big one. Many of us college students love caffeine, and it's what gets us through the day sometimes if we really need it. But too much is not healthy for us and can affect us in the smallest things, which will be explained a little further. But first, it is recommended to not have more than 400 milligrams a day. What really surprised me as well was caffeine in powder or liquid form can provide toxic levels of caffeine according to like the Food and Drug Administration, and they have like cautioned us as well. Just 1 teaspoon of powdered caffeine is equivalent to about 28 cups of coffee, which I thought was crazy. Such high levels of these can cause serious health problems and possibly death. So you may want to cut back if you're drinking more than 4 cups of caffeinated coffee a day or equivalent. And especially if you have certain side effects such as headache, insomnia, nervousness, irritability, a fast heartbeat, and muscle tremors. So how we can improve the caffeine habits, being aware of the amount you take per day, start paying attention to how much caffeine you're getting from foods and beverages, including energy drinks. Read the labels carefully of what you're taking. Remember that your estimate of what you're intaking may be a little low because some foods or drinks that contain caffeine don't list it. But it's good to be aware of how much you're consuming. And then slowly cut back. Drink 1 fewer can of soda or drink a smaller cup of coffee each day. Avoid drinking caffeinated beverages during the day. And then just with these smaller changes, it can help your body get used to the lower levels of caffeine and lessen the potential of withdrawal effects. You can try decaf. Me personally, I think it almost tastes like the same. So, and most do. So it's a good way to try to like transition. And some of them even look the same as well. Another would be to shorten your brew time if you do, depending on how you brew your coffee. Like if you make tea, you can brew it for less time. And I actually learned this not too long ago. I didn't know tea had caffeine until I saw like caffeine-free products. And but another alternative would be like herbal teas, and then finding teas that say caffeine-free. And then also always check the bottle when you're taking certain supplements. So looking for over-the-counter pain relievers. Some of them contain caffeine, so looking for caffeine-free pain relievers instead would be very helpful and can help adjust your body as well. So exercise. Exercise is very recommended to help avoid cardiovascular diseases. Recommended for 30 minutes or more with light to moderate intensity. So this is perfect for if you're just starting off. You don't have to start at a high intensity level. Obviously, this will depend on people's jobs and occupations, if they're moving around a lot, their leisure activities, what they do on the side, hobbies. So this can vary, but light to moderate intensity is okay. And a helpful tip is that if you can't talk while doing the exercise, then you're working too hard. But if you can sing while you're exercising, then you need to work a little bit harder because you shouldn't be doing that much of a light work. And exercise also helps improve heart muscles to better pump blood throughout the body. So also helps body tissue and the heart to pull oxygen from the blood, and it also helps give a better blood flow in the small blood vessels. So some additional benefits of Exercise would be, besides helping reduce risk of CVD, it can also help lower weight or keep it from increasing. It improves your mood, lowers the risk of certain cancers, improves your balance, reduce risk of osteoporosis, and increase energy levels, and improves your sleep as well. And that is it for our presentation. Thank you guys for listening throughout the whole time. If you guys have any questions, you can go ahead and shoot us an email, or you can ask Professor Bernard, and he can like direct us from your email, whichever works. So thank you guys.
Thanks.